Okay, we have a great show for you today. Some good news, sarcasm alert. New York spends $60,000 less per homeless person than San Francisco, which spends 141,000. So New York spends around 81,000. Big win for New York. Sarcasm. We'll get into some of that. The problem with that really is that the money doesn't go to the homeless. It goes through a web of nonprofits, and who the heck knows what's happening there. We just saw some data out of New York that 20% of the workforce work for nonprofits supported by our tax dollars. That's insane. This is how it happens. All right, this is The Ordinary American. Welcome. I'm your host, Paul Sarkis. Thank you for being here. We appreciate the views. Please like, follow, subscribe, all the things. This is an anti-leftist show. We are anti-leftist, therefore we're anti-democrat. We are trying to spread information around, get people to see the error of their ways if they've been voting for Democrats all these years. The great Nick Cannon just came out with a little piece where he talked about how people don't realize that the KKK was a Democrat creation, as was slavery. Good for him. We might come back to that a little later. Okay, this past weekend, we did a special 15-minute short piece on Bitcoin. We got some requests to go into some Bitcoin. We did it from an ordinary American's point of view. It was not financial advice. I'm just a guy in front of a great flag who loves God, his family, and his country. Not financial advice. It's never religious advice. It's not medical advice. It's not life advice. We're just spreading information and hoping that some of this helps make your life better. Okay, but people really responded well to that video. It was the practical guide. We just tried to answer the question, why would an ordinary American care about and want to buy Bitcoin? We tagged at the end two securities, STRC and SATA. I fumbled that a little bit and used the wrong ticker symbol for that second one, SATA and STRC. Oversimplified, you'll see this in the video. Bitcoin solves two problems. One's the money printing problem, the other is the trust and control problem. Go watch the video. We'd love to hear your comments. If we can be helpful, please reach out. The Ordinary American at proton.me or The Ord American on X. We'll have most of the stuff we discuss will be on the X. It's sort of our show notes. Okay, let's get into it. Tons of stuff today. The first topic is something that I was living in LA in 2013, and I was reading about ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is what it sounds like. It's when you harvest ballots. It's when you go out and you collect a whole bunch of ballots and bring them to the voting place and you hand them in. At the time, California's law, like many states, allowed a family member, if somebody had a disability or some other reason they couldn't get to the polls, a family member could take their ballot and bring it to the poll. You know, it seemed reasonable, like most things. And then the left got a hold of it. And they did it incrementally. They first changed it so it didn't have to be a family member and it didn't have to be just for disability. And then in 2016, they changed the law. When the law changed, essentially they made something that was illegal, legal. And this is the concept that I see too often. The left makes things that are illegal, legal, and then says, see, it's legal. We're going to go into a few of those things today, but ballot harvesting was the first one that I really saw firsthand, because as soon as ballot harvesting in California became legal, and for clarification, what that law said in 2016, which passed on party lines largely, was that anyone could collect any number of ballots from anyone. So somebody can get paid to do it. They can go out and they can collect ballots. They can go to an elderly facility or an apartment building or anything and just say, hey, I'll collect your ballot and bring it in. Obviously, that corrupts the chain of control. Obviously, you don't know what they did from the point that they took it to the point that they turn it in. Who knows? If they go to some elderly facility and there's a Trump sign somewhere, they might collect everybody's ballot and then toss them in the trash. It's the honor system. which is insane. But they made it legal. And then, of course, that's really when we started getting all of these, especially in the congressional races, these things where it was like the Republican was ahead. And then at 4 in the morning, they found a bunch of ballots. And then they counted them. And lo and behold, the Democrat won. It's an obvious effort to legalize corruption. And in the process of doing it, I mean, you almost have to admire the audacity. They allowed someone, taxpayers, spoiler alert, to pay the people to do it. They put in a caveat that said you can't pay per ballot, but you can pay a lump sum. So that was able to get the nonprofits in, and our tax dollars go and then pay to have that ballot harvesting done. So that's sort of one example of this concept of making something that is or should be illegal, legal. Now, fortunately, no other state has gone to the extreme that California has gone, but some of the blue states have tried to sort of get there. Okay? And I contrast this with the old days where we used to have discussions and debates over policy. You know, the classic one is sort of a tax policy, like, you know, the Democrats might want a 35% rate and the Republicans might say 27, and, you know, you whittle it down and you agree somewhere in the middle. We don't seem to do that anymore. Now we talk about a wealth tax, which is illegal and probably, hopefully, won't be passed, but if it ever is, it will hopefully be turned away by the courts because it's, in my opinion, clearly illegal. But it's an attempt to make something that's illegal, legal, or in some cases just, you know, not moral or unfair or unjust. Let me go way back. Go back to the Nick Cannon thing. Nick Cannon talks about the KKK being a Democrat creation, which it was. He didn't mention this, but Woodrow Wilson allowed the first movie played in the White House to be a movie called Birth of a Nation, which was essentially the KKK recruitment video. Just a terrible stain on the White House. Why do I bring up something from back then? People don't realize that there was a case called Dred Scott. We often hear that. We don't know what it means. Oversimplified, ordinary Americans' point of view. That was a case that essentially legalized slavery, making what should have been illegal, legal. Certainly making something that was not moral, legal. There were 9 members on the Supreme Court at the time. 7 of them were Democrats. 2 of them were Republicans. I'm sure you know where this is going. 7 Democrats voted in favor. 2 Republicans voted against. Okay, just because a court says that it's legal doesn't mean it's just, doesn't mean it's right. And as we would all agree now, slavery shouldn't have been legal. So we could all agree that that was illegal. This is that concept, trying to make something that is illegal, legal. Go to immigration, open the borders. Illegal immigration should be illegal. It's even in the name. We're trying to make it legal as a practical matter by skipping the rules, by just opening up. And by the way, this is what the leftists, the Democrats do, is when they can't get it approved through the right process, they go around the process. I've brought up before, same-sex marriage in California, whether you like it or not, California voters voted against it and one unelected judge made it legal. That's going around the will of the people. The No Kings nonsense this weekend, 77 million people voted for Trump. It was the popular vote, the Electoral College vote, and it was 0.1% away from 50% or a majority. I guess 0.2 away of a majority. Okay? And now with the No Kings rally, they're trying to say, no, you people who voted for him, you don't get to say, we get to say. This is trying to go around the process. This is the same thing, trying to make something that is illegal, legal, or trying to, as a practical matter, make something illegal, legal. As a practical matter, 77 million people voted for Trump. He should be allowed to run the government as he sees fit for his 4 years. The Democrats aren't allowing that. We'll skip over the obvious, which is that if 77 million people, which is the popular vote for it, it's not very kingly to have the majority vote, and then that's who it is. That's more of a democracy. I would have my own quibbles with democracy. It's often been described as two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. But you can't say the guy that got all the votes, and by the way, he got all the votes in a wide swath of people, including most of the border counties. I think that's critically important. So this concept of trying to make things legal that are illegal, it's frustrating, and we don't get to discuss policy because the left tries to change society. So we're not, talking about this kind of a change. We're talking about that kind of a change off the screen. Trump calls this out. This is one of the benefits of Trump. Trump just comes out and says, for example, not passing the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, is an effort to allow for cheating in elections. Yes, obviously, we've been over before. It's not racist. 94% of black voting age Americans already have a photo ID. So there's nothing that needs to change. 6% don't. We all can get that 6% over the edge and get them a photo ID. But he calls it out. And we have to start calling it out more and more and more. Okay, this is just a concept that was ringing around in my head, and I see it in all these different issues. There's a few issues we're going to get to now that are related, but we're going to move on to some other issues here that are sort of related. The insider trading that goes on in Congress. This is something that should be illegal, but they've made legal. Many of the people who are elected in Congress now make more from their trading than they do from their salary. They have a bunch of, what I would call head fake laws that they get to rely on, like whatever it's called, the Stop the Trade Act or something. I forget the name of it. They like to rely on that. There hasn't been anyone tried or convicted for any of this illegal trading, in my opinion, under these acts. Why? Because there's hang-ups to the way that it's been written. And I'm not going to get into the constitutional legal aspect, but when things are discussed in a professional legal setting, in a hearing, it's got some protections that have its roots based in probably fair and decent law, which is that they didn't want the president to sort of make things illegal that the Congress might choose to do. But what Congress has done, making things that are illegal, legal, is they extended that into things like insider trading. So if they discuss some contract that some company is going to get, and then they run out and trade or have a family member trade on it, the prosecutors can't even get that information because it's restricted, because it was discussed in a professional setting. Not okay. Not okay. It's a whole different class of people. And Trump calls this out. This gets to the overall concept of the corruption flywheel and why we are an anti-leftist show and why we are so pro-Trump, because he calls these things out. And from our point of view, he's the first and only advocate for ordinary Americans that we've had in a very long time. So, our effort here is to educate people as much as we can and have them not vote for Democrats. Again, you may have to hold your nose because you've always voted for Democrats. Dad voted for Democrats. Mom voted for Democrats. Grandpa, grandma, we've always voted for Democrats. That may be true. That's not this anymore. There are no more blue dog Democrats. It's just not the way it is. This is a full leftist party. And if the Democrats get control of the House and the Senate, they're certainly going to impeach Trump. I heard this from a big libertarian, a big person in the libertarian movement, somebody very senior in the libertarian movement. And what she said was, I'm going to have to hold my nose, but I'm not going to vote for Democrats because I can't have Trump impeached because that wouldn't be right or okay for the values and the things we want to get done. That's what it comes down to. Okay. All right, we want to move on to a few other topics. There's a lot. It is Holy Week, so we're going to reserve some time at the end to talk a little bit about God and religion and the importance of it in our life. As we say on here, the greatest life hack we can do is to have a relationship with God. Okay, the great Mike Rowe really, I don't think attack's the right word, but he responded to Jimmy Kimmel, who came out and said that Markwayne Mullin was a plumber and therefore Trump's a dope for having a plumber in charge of the Department of Homeland Security. I thought Mike Rowe's comments were really the most appropriate. What he basically said was, why can't a guy who was a plumber evolve and study and train and do things that get him to be smart enough to do other things? Are the only people who can do that are the intellectuals or the entertainers? I mean, honestly, Jimmy Kimmel is essentially just a court jester, but he's opining on all kinds of sophisticated topics. What value does the court jester bring that the plumber doesn't bring? So I liked what Mike Rowe had to say, and I thought it was important to mention it because part of what we all need to do is we all need to study and learn and pay attention. Marc Andreessen, extremely successful and smart venture capital guy, created Netscape and then went on to become, I think arguably one of the best venture capital investors of all time. He was saying recently that we need to sort of limit, I think what he was saying was we need to limit our exposure to information. It's just too much. He was making a comment about the phones. I agree with him on the phones. We're all on our phones too much, particularly, if we can limit children's screen time, that's a good thing. I think that's a tremendous thing, but that's another topic for another day. I wanted to offer up a counter opinion to Marc Andreessen's version, and I actually think he might agree with this. It's not really that we should limit our exposure to information. We need to limit our exposure to bad information. Well, how do you know which is bad information and which is not information? Well, the wrong way to do it is to rely on government. And we've talked about that and we'll talk more about that, but that's the wrong way. Dennis Prager, who I learn a ton from, so I mention him quite a lot on this show, he gives this simple guideline. If you're trying to figure out which side on something is offering up a more true opinion, whichever side is more willing to have more information available to you is the one you should go to. You don't have to access all that information, but they're willing to make it available for you. So in this context, the Democrats try to keep information from us, whether they be on the vaccines or on the Russia hoax or on the CIA's work trying to get rid of Trump or the FBI's work. All of this stuff, they try to limit our access to information. Through DNI Gabbard and the other people in the Trump administration, they're trying to get us information. Okay? We can then digest it. The great John Solomon has pieces almost every day, unfortunately. Unfortunately, not because he's not great, but because there's so much information, sadly. Okay? So that's an example of what Dennis Prager is talking about. And he describes it much more eloquently than I can. He says, whoever wants to give you more information, that's the one you should listen to. So I think, as it relates to the Marc Andreessen comments, we need to keep ourselves engaged. We need to not put our head in the sand. We need, unfortunately, now to pay attention more than ever and see what's really happening and really know what we're voting for. Because as I say all the time, and I said a few minutes ago, your dad and mom might have voted Democrat. That might be in your bones, and you think Democrat's good. If you're really paying attention, you're going to find out that the Democrats are a leftist party, and your parents were not probably leftists. And just like Ronald Reagan said, I didn't leave the Democrat Party left me. Or just like I've shared, Bill Clinton could not get elected running on the platform he ran on twice. He's way too conservative. And even Barack Obama, when he ran in 2008, being against same-sex marriage, he couldn't get elected in a Democrat primary today on that platform. So the parties moved far, far left, my left. So we need to be able to digest information and come up with really sound decisions. And I've said this before, we do it all the time. Ordinary Americans, I go to get my car fixed. Every time, I am not Adam Carolla. Okay, I'm probably not Mike Rowe. I imagine he knows a lot about cars. I don't. So when I go there and they tell me that this and then that, and you got to get this fixed, I almost always feel like, am I being taken? I got to make the best decision I can make in that moment with the information I have. That's just one example. Ordinary Americans have to make these kinds of decisions all the time without the experts. All the time. So that's just something that I think is important, is that we don't want to put our head in the sand. We don't want to just sort of like, there's a lot of information, so here, muffs, la, 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 I don't want to hear. We can't do that. That's how we got here. The left did the long march through the institutions. They got control, and that's how we got here. What we need to do is make ourselves constantly open and available to the real information, and then we need to be involved, I guess, as much as we need to be to keep society as free as we want it. That, I think, is an incredibly important topic. So I don't even know that Marc Andreessen would, necessarily disagree with me. I mean, he might, but I'm not sure. I'd love to have that conversation with him. If he's out there, I hope he'll send me an email or chime in. I'd like to hear his point of view on that. All right, something else that came across, which is just another example for me of how the elected class lives by different rules. And I'm going to tie it into the nonprofits here in a second. I didn't know that there were these special rules that allow members of Congress and the Senate to sometimes have us pay for private jet flights for them. I'm going to skip all the specifics. Anybody can look it up. I'm just going to say the general notion that we should pay for private jet travel for them and expect them never to abuse it is kind of silly. I'm going to tie that to this notion that the workforce in New York is 20% filled with non-profit workers working for nonprofits that are supported by taxpayer money. Whenever you hear government-supported nonprofits, taxpayers. That's a euphemism. We pay for that. Those people are probably mostly really good people. But they go in to try to do something good. I don't know what the, fill in the blank for some cause that some nonprofit is working for. Maybe it's homeless related. And they think, I'm really doing something good. I am participating and helping. And maybe they are. But what's also happening is they're getting corrupted and they don't know it. It's not exactly like an MK Ultra situation, but it is a manipulation. Why? Well, they get in, and now they're in this nonprofit world with most of these nonprofits that are unbelievably heavy Democrat leaning, leftist leaning. We see the data every day. George Soros funds most of the No Kings protests. It's not organic. That other guy, Singham, I think his name is, and then our tax dollars. So when somebody goes and works for one of these nonprofits, they start to get indoctrinated. One of the things they're told is, if Republicans take over, you might lose your funding, you might lose your job. You got to vote for Democrats. That's a form of a bribe. It's not a direct bribe, but it's a form of a bribe. It's a form of a manipulation. The solution is that our tax dollars shouldn't be going to those nonprofits. Those nonprofits should survive on their own by private donations. Even better, there should be no nonprofit status. Even better, there shouldn't be any tax at all, then there would be no nonprofit status to hand out. The nonprofit status becomes a bribe in and of itself. It hands it out to certain people. As we've been over before, the IRS in 2012 kept conservative groups from receiving nonprofit status, so they couldn't raise as much money. How do we know that? The IRS paid a fine of over $3 million to a bunch of conservative groups. When I say that, what I'm really saying is we paid that fine, our tax dollars. So you can see that corruption flywheel. The people who put those policies in place, they bear no responsibility. Nothing happens. They use our tax dollars to pay it in the first place or not pay it. And then to pay the fine, they use our tax dollars. Same thing is happening right now with these nonprofits that we're finding out are receiving trillions of our dollars. And thankfully, things are starting to happen. And we're hopefully going to get to the bottom of it. And if we eliminate it, we will go a long way to eliminating the funding for Democrats, one, and ordinary Americans will get to keep more of their own money, two. Now, Scott Bessent turning out to be a superstar at Treasury. And as I've said before, I pay attention in the finance world, in economics. I never heard of him before. Trump picks him up, and now he is special. And one of the things he just announced was that they're going to offer a 30% essentially bonus for any whistleblowers that bring in scams and stealing of our money through these nonprofit scams. And I think it's going to come from any penalties that end up getting paid. And the first thing that I thought was, why can't Nick Shirley, James O'Keefe, Muddrucker, why can't any of those or the other ones that are already out doing it qualify for that? I hope they do qualify. They've already, I don't know if you call them whistleblowers, but they've gone out and done the work. I didn't see any movement by the federal government until these guys went out and did these things. I hope they get a chance to get that. Okay, moving on. I'm leaving some time for Holy Week, but moving on. One of the things about Trump that I think is so interesting is that, and allow me just a little bit of backstory on somebody running for president. Usually when people run for president, they have to go around to every precinct and neighborhood and county and district in every state and essentially collect people, local officials, community activists, prominent people in the community on their team, because the name recognition required to run for president is a lot. And most ordinary Americans don't know, or didn't in the past, all the congressmen, senators, or governors who might be running for president. And every time somebody goes, like if you're a congressman from California and you go to the East Coast and you go to these communities, you need somebody in every community. They're passing out flyers on your behalf. They're knocking on doors. They're holding events. They're sharing your platform. They're trying to drive the vote. Well, that person goes on a list. And that list becomes somebody that if that candidate wins, that person on that list gets something. That's how it works. It's oversimplified, it's kind of crude, and it may have some a little bit more complicated pieces in that, but that's kind of how it works. I saw this for the first time way back in Bush 1, the first Bush, when he ran for president. There was a local, pardon me, I think he was a state rep named Andrew Card in Massachusetts. He was a Republican. And, because he was a Republican in Massachusetts, he didn't have any say over anything. But he signed on with Bush the father very, very early. And I think he became transportation secretary with George Bush the father. But he had a cabinet position, I believe. That's an example of somebody who signs on early and gets a position. Qualified or not, doesn't matter. That's how it works. Why? Because name recognition. In a place like Massachusetts, Bush needs enough people to get his name out there, even though he was vice president at the time. Okay, how does that relate to Trump? Trump was essentially probably the most famous person who ever ran for president when he ran for president. And so unlike every other candidate before him, he needed zero work on name recognition. None. Zero. So he didn't have to go around collecting chits with everybody in these different districts and these different precincts and whatever. Nothing. He back then tweeted, and he got massive amounts of press, and everybody knew his name, and everywhere he went, the cameras were, and so he could just talk to the people. Okay, why do I mention all that? Because what he's done is he's over time evolved that even further. He's got his Truth Social, that irritates some TDS sufferers. You should use this time of year, Holy Week, to work on forgiveness. We ask for forgiveness. We agree to give forgiveness. You could forgive Trump if you're a Democrat and that irritates you. He's got Truth Social. I bring it up here. because you should go on Truth Social and look at his posts. He is constantly posting and talking to us. He's sharing things. I didn't know until I went on there, I think it was today or yesterday, and look and said that we're getting some prisoners back. Now I'm drawing a blank on which Eastern European type country. I didn't know that. No one's covering that. By the way, another thing nobody's covering, I think it was over 10,000 and maybe much more Iranian Americans holding a way bigger rally in DC this weekend, pro-Trump, pro-America, than the No Kings rally. But you saw the No Kings rally and you didn't see this. Trump can talk directly to us now. Now, if you're a Democrat or you're a TDS person, you're not watching his tweets. You're only seeing what comes up. I'd encourage you, go look at them. Read what he's saying. For example, he put out a tweet over the weekend, I forget which day, or not a tweet, a social. He said Obamacare is a joke, etc., which it is. We should just take all of the money that the federal government collects from taxpayers and give it back to taxpayers and let them spend it on their health care the way they want. Now, who out there, I've watched the videos, young people being frustrated that healthcare is so expensive, and it is. Who wouldn't want to just say, let's skip all the money going to the insurance companies? They're corrupt anyways. We'll get back to that because that's how they get them to vote Democrat. Same thing as the nonprofits, because they're getting their money from the government. So everybody in that company suddenly realizes that my bread is buttered through the government sending us this money, and they vote Democrat. Okay? But who amongst us doesn't say, wait a second, don't give it to the insurance company. Give it to us. Let me decide. Yes, you can restrict it to spending only on health care. Okay. If I don't spend it this year, maybe it means I didn't have anything that went wrong this year. Maybe I save it and it goes to some problem I might have in the future. That's common sense. Trump's out there sending that message out to people directly. He's not needing to wait to do a white paper. He's not needing to wait to do a special interview. He's not waiting for legislation. He's just saying we should do that. He's changed the nature of how we interact with our president. And as the great Jan Bongino always points out, contrasts. Contrast that to Biden. We went weeks and longer without hearing from him. Maybe we got a picture of his, unpleasant bathing suit picture from the beach in Rehoboth. But we didn't hear from him for weeks, and now we find out later on that there was a lot going on, and it just wasn't him. It was the auto pen. So I'd urge you, go to Truth Social and look up his posts and look at all the things he puts out and see what he's saying to you, especially young people, or especially Jewish Americans who have been voting for Barack Obama. I got some responses on some tweets saying, Obama didn't give pallets of cash. That was the Iranians' money. Listen, if you choose to believe that, you're like Robert the Bruce in Braveheart. You're choosing to be deceived. The money that Barack Obama gave the mullahs may have indeed been the Iranians' money, but the mullahs in no way represent the Iranians. The mullahs took over a country, stole the Iranian people's money and natural resources, and have ruled for 47 years. Obama gave them money. Maybe it was the Iranian people's money. It wasn't the regime's money, because the regime didn't give it to the people. They used it to fund terrorism around the world, build nukes, fund Hamas, fund Hezbollah, fund the Houthis and others, to create chaos and suffering. So if you're a Jewish American and you've been voting for Obama who did that, this is a great time to abandon that. That's okay. Behind you. Move on. Next play is the most important play. Can't be voting to fund the people who caused the terror and the chaos. It's not okay. Trump is out here talking to us. He's sharing all this information with us. Go read him. Go listen. Please. Okay. All right. We want to take a few minutes Maybe one of these Saturdays we'll do a special episode on some of the life hacks that involve prayer and God. As we say, the greatest life hack anybody can do is a relationship with God. And as I also say, even if you're an atheist or a mild atheist, or not really an atheist, but you believe in some things, or you sort of believe, or you're not sure if you believe, any of these things, you should be praying. It will make your life better. Again, I'll say it. I'm just a guy in front of a flag. I love God, I love my family, and I love my country. But I'm not a priest and I'm not a pastor. I don't consider myself to be Charlie Kirk, expert in theology. I'm just an ordinary American who's been making his way and has found, through making his own mistakes, and found his way to God and found out that his life is better with God in it. It is not a Zendo utopia. That is not what happens. But it is better. This is Holy Week. Holy Week is the week where Christians celebrate the death and resurrection of Christ. He died for our sins. He was resurrected on the third day and rose, and he sits at the right hand of the Father. He died for our sins. This is why and how we are forgivable. People, we can be forgiven by God. We are forgiven by God. He loves us. He wanted us specifically to be here. And here at this time, we play a role in his plan. We don't know what that is. In my life, when I've been farthest from him, I haven't wanted to do his will. I've wanted to do my will. I think, I'm going to try this. I don't know if I'm going to get it right. I think it's in Judges. I think. And it says, there weren't any kings in Israel, and therefore people did what they thought was right in their own eyes. That's turning away from the will of God and doing whatever we want. I think a lot of younger people, I certainly was like this, I didn't want to have that kind of supervision, like thinking about what would God want in the situation. I can promise you, lots of the decisions I was making in my early 20s, mid-20s, and later, God would not have been okay with. But I didn't want to think about that. Why? Because I wanted to do what I thought was right. That's my will. So during Holy Week, Christians will often try to pray about, please, help us do your will. Doesn't mean we can't ask for things. The Bible tells us we have to ask. God, our Father, wants to be asked. It doesn't mean he's going to do it. It's not how it works, unfortunately. But the other aspect I wanted to bring up is that everything with Christianity is voluntary. There is no compulsion. Jesus never says, you better follow me or else. It doesn't work that way. It has to be voluntary. That's not true of all religions. That is true of Christianity. Okay, in the 12-step programs, there's something called, they say, attraction rather than promotion. It was created by two Christian guys, so that makes sense that they would have that philosophy. So on Holy Week, we try to remember that God died for our sins. And if we take that fully in, I mean, I got to tell you, there's some days if I really take that in, particularly if I'm watching scenes from The Chosen, you know, it can get very sad very quickly. Jesus was human. He suffered. Yes, he was divine also, but he was also human, and he suffered. He suffered for us. So we try to honor him. His words were, you're forgiven, sin, go and sin no more. He knows we're probably going to sin again. But it's that effort to try to fight against that draw to sin that's so important and that will make a big difference in our lives. I bring it up because I heard something a few times over the last maybe 5 or 10 years, and especially maybe more recently. And what it said was, men especially, but women too, should work to be dangerous and then be able to turn that dangerous into good. And part of the way we do that, I think, is by studying and knowing this is usually more important than this, although this can be important. And studying and knowing God and praying, I think, is the biggest part of being able to be dangerous. When you believe and when you have God on your side, things open up. You see things in different ways. And I think it can help make us dangerous. We want to be capable of doing dangerous things and then choosing to do the right thing. And if needed, then we're capable. We can do the dangerous thing. And we see that play out. Saw that play out with those ROTC soldiers. Which campus was it recently? Where the guy came in with a gun and they ended up killing him with a knife. They were deadly when they needed to be deadly. They work against that. They don't do that every day. That's a great example. So it's Holy Week. I listen to Father Mike Schmitz, as I say all the time. I don't know the guy. I think he's awesome. He's like my brother, and I never met him. And I hope I get to meet him someday. He has really helped my life. So that's who I listen to. I pray on my own. I pray with my family. And I go to church. If you're just starting out, just pray. Just pray. You can do more. You can never do too much, but just pray. Get to know God. Share with Him your thoughts, your fears, your anxieties, your hopes and your dreams. Ask for forgiveness. Ask for the things you need, the strength to do the things you want to do. You can acknowledge that you know you're a sinner, that you know that too often we do our will and not God's will. So that's a Holy Week little piece. I just wanted to mention that. I think that it's a spiritual battle between the left and the right. I mentioned last week at one point, I think it's the 8th commandment, thou shalt not steal. That is biblical and it is also anti-leftist. Private property. You can't steal something, but it's not somebody else's. That's something else's private property. Leftism is incompatible with Judeo-Christian principles and values. It is not compatible. We think it's a spiritual battle. We think we need more God, not less God in our life. We believe that the founding fathers created a system of government that was suited only for a religious and moral people. That is a quote from John Adams. That is not me. Only suited for religious and moral people. So we need more religion, not less. Separation of church and state is not something that's in the Constitution. That came from a letter, and it had much more to do with the fact that the states were concerned that the federal government was going to impose a national religion. And just remember that the state governments created the federal government, not the other way around. The state governments created the federal government, not the other way around. And at the time of the founding, I think the number was maybe 9 of the 13 had state-sponsored religions. In God we trust. It's everywhere. I'm drawing a blank. There is a quote from the Old Testament, the Torah, on the Liberty Bell. The founding fathers, I've said it before, mostly Protestant, one Catholic who signed the Declaration of Independence, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. You can see his signature basically under John Hancock's. You can't miss his. All right, we're ordinary Americans, making America great again. We're supporting Donald Trump because he's right. We're supporting Donald Trump because he is the advocate for ordinary Americans. We are anti-leftists. We hope you'll join us. Spread the episode around. Please take a look at the episode from the weekend on Bitcoin. Any questions? TheOrdinaryAmerican@proton.me, TheOrdAmerican on X. And we will see you